Hi, it's Mo. It's so late. A lot's been going on. Not bad things, good things, I think. Just a lot of work and some days off in there. My husband is learning how to fly a drone, so we've been going to local parks and local areas to practice. He's at the very early stages and he's super conscious about not disturbing people or disturbing animals. We actually were in a park yesterday that there were a lot of deer, and so the deer were getting a little bit disturbed, so we cut the drone session short. I imagine.
Only 1,000 times.
It's didn't that come out in the 90s? Trying to learn how to do that, use it as a new skill, and maybe I'm going to reap the benefits because maybe he's going to do some drone shots for these vlogs, which would be fun. I did finish a couple of books last week. I finished Sherlock Holmes and the Case of Sabina Hall by L.B. Greenwood. This is a Sherlock Holmes book, not sanctioned by the Sherlock Holmes people, but I do like to read an occasional Sherlock Holmes, and I do think that L.B. Greenwood is someone who wrote a lot of Sherlock Holmes novels in the 80s and 90s. I believe I've read a couple of stories from anthologies that L.B. Greenwood edited. I don't think I've ever read an L.B. Greenwood story before that. If you know the lore, if you watched my Basement Box book series in 2024, a friend gave me dozens of Sherlock Holmes books because he knew I liked Sherlock Holmes and he had tons that he was getting rid of. So I had all these Sherlock Holmes books and I've pared them down a lot over the years, but this is one that I was interested in, partly because, like I said, L.B. Greenwood is someone who has written a lot of Sherlock Holmes novels before, and partly because I have a friend named Sabina and I never see that name, so I thought that was cool. And this one was really fun. It was interesting. It definitely has the tone and vibe of a Sherlock Holmes novel, and it definitely writes in a way, talks in a way that Sherlock Holmes and Watson would talk. As many Sherlock Holmes, this has kind of a framing narrative of the idea that this is a case that they went on early on, so Watson and Holmes are still kind of getting to know each other. They're still at the early stages of their working relationship as well as their friendship. Watson is only now deciding to tell this story later on in life, maybe because there were important people in it, or maybe because it doesn't shed Sherlock in the most perfect light or whatever, but it follows Sherlock Holmes and John Watson as they go to Sabina Hall because an old friend of Sherlock's, a person that he went to school with, contacts Sherlock and says something's amiss at the hall where my aunt and uncle are, and I really need a doctor. Do you know a doctor? And of course, Sherlock knows a doctor, and he sends Watson, and he goes along himself as well. So it's kind of one of those things that Sherlock kind of knows or suspects more right from the beginning and puts things in place. Sherlock loves to drop those actions for something and clues and activities that are going to come up later, and that's definitely a book like this. So he kind of puts some things in place that are going to come into play later when he solves the mystery. But overall, I really enjoyed this. It was super fun, fast-paced, easy to read. I like a Sherlock Holmes novel. Obviously, I like Conan Doyle's novels the best, but I'm always up for a good reimagining or a non-sanctioned version of Sherlock Holmes as well. The next book that I finished this week was my reread of Beloved. So if you may recall that 2 weeks ago I finished Beloved and I really enjoyed it. This is Toni Morrison's most well-known work, I believe. And people say it's her most disturbing work, but I don't know if I feel the same. I think The Bluest Eye might be her most disturbing work that I've read so far. Obviously, I enjoyed this book because I felt compelled to immediately reread it on audio. I literally finished my physical read of it in the morning. The audiobook came in from Libby a few days earlier and I decided to check it out and then immediately started my reread like several hours after finishing it physically. And I loved listening to it on audio. I think I don't want to listen to all of them on audio first. I think I do want to read as many as I can physically first. Toni Morrison is such a great reader, and obviously I love when an author reads their writing anytime, but Toni Morrison's voice is just very soothing and very captivating, and there is something a little bit disturbing, or at least there's a juxtaposition of comfort and disturbing nature when she reads horrific scenes and when she's telling you horrible things that are happening to her characters. If you want my full review on this, you can definitely go to that prior video. I also am going to have a TBR Spin video coming out about this book. I will have it in my March wrap up, so I won't talk more about it here, but obviously if you've never read Toni Morrison, like, what are you doing? You need to read Toni Morrison. Like, the hype is real. The last book that I finished this week, I'm at the very end of this week, is Dead by Morning by Dorothy Simpson. This is the 9th book in the Luke Thanet mystery series. Luke Thanet is a detective in Surrington, England. He tends to go to small towns, small murder towns around this like small city in England, solving his cases with his Lieutenant Inspector Lineman. He and Lineman are good friends, and I think Thanet sees himself in Lineman, in that Lineman is now kind of in the middle of his early career, but still in the beginning of his long-rooted career, what's going to be a long-rooted career, and Lineman is definitely not ready to be a detective inspector. Like, he's not ready for the next step. He's not ready even in his life. He's like newly married. He now has 2 kids. He still struggles with his mother-in-law. He still struggles with balancing life and work. And that's something that always comes up in this series, is that balance for policemen of life and work. So in this, Lineman is helping his brother-in-law, and he stays up late one night and he's not as capable on the job because he's so tired. So Thanet kind of calls him out on that. One of the main themes of all these books is seeing Thanet and his relationship to his family, and how you can imagine that maybe Lineman is a younger version of him, and maybe some of the mistakes that Lineman has made, Thanet might have made early on as well. But now Thanet is in this comfortable place with his wife, with his kids, with his balance of life and work, for the most part. Like, Thanet, the entire series, is battling different issues with his children. He has an older daughter and a younger son, and so in the last book that I read, his son was traumatized because one of his friends died sniffing glue. So Thanet has to go into that. He has to talk to his young son about that. He has to deal with something that was quite a prevalent issue in the 80s and 90s when these books were written. This installment of the series was written in 1989. So this series really goes, I think, from the late 70s or early 80s to the 90s, because there's quite a few other ones in this series. And I really like this series. I just find these mysteries to be very fun, light, fluffy, easy to read. I like the writing, and I find the writing to be interesting. They follow a very pattern, a very specific pattern. So these are not really books and mysteries that you can solve. These are more just follow along, know that there's a pattern, and you know, just see what's inserted in the pattern. This one was interesting because one of the things that was inserted in the normal pattern is that he had a lot of hostile witnesses. He always has some, but there was a lot, and so that made this one kind of a fun read. I will say that the solve of this book, well, again, while you can't actually solve it yourself, but the resolution of the mystery in this book is something that comes up a lot in these books and a lot in cozy fiction like this from the 80s and 90s. So once you got the idea of where Thanos was going, you're like, oh, I know where he's going, because like every other book in this series has that plot device, which is an icky plot device, which is not a great plot device, and which is definitely becoming an overused plot device in these books. I don't know. Yeah, I had mixed feelings. I really enjoyed the beginning of this, and I really enjoyed the different characters of the suspects in this one, and trying to piece together why the person who was killed was unliked by many of them. But the resolve was kind of, I felt a little bit of like a cop-out and a little bit of a repetitive theme from what we've seen from these books before. But I will not stop reading them. I read these books out of order. I just pick them up whenever I find them. I haven't found one in a long time, and actually my supply is dwindling. And then I just read the next earliest in the series. So a couple of years ago I got the first in the series. I'd already read like 4 or 5 books, but I read that one as the next book I was going to read because it was the first in the series. I think I've read the first, second, well, I don't know. I can't look it up right now. Oh, I could, but well, I'm not going to. I've read like 6 or 7 maybe. And like I said, I think there's like 15 or 16, so I'm getting close to halfway through, and I will continue to read these. I do love this cover. It is so good. So those are the books that I finished. I think that's everything. Let me check let me just check my notes. Yeah, because last week I talked about the one book that I finished last week, which was No One Left to Come Looking for You, and then I finished the Sherlock Holmes book, and then I refinished Beloved, and then I finished Dead by Morning, and I haven't finished another book since then. It is March 31st, so I probably will not be finishing any more books today. I thought I was going to finish another book this month, but no. It's a Tuesday, so I've been wanting to make these videos Monday to Sunday, or at least like Monday to Monday, but this one's not gonna make it. It's gonna be whatever last week was to now. I don't know. It's interesting that this video is ending on the last day of the month. That kind of makes it nice and neat. So if you want to see all the books that I read throughout March, I will be doing a full March monthly wrap-up, but it won't be a vlog style wrap-up. It'll be different. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. Unfortunately, I'm not able to concentrate on them and mold them to be exactly what I want just yet. But hopefully in the next month or so, things will ease up at my job. It'll be springtime. We'll all be out and about more and doing more things and having more energy. So hopefully I will get to do some different versions of this weekly update. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining me for this weekly update. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I read here. Let me know what you thought of them. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!